Hello, yogis. Speaking directly to you today. This is for folks who are doing studio classes, online, outside, anywhere that you can right now. You've been doing yoga for a while, but you haven't added any strength training. You haven't added any resistance or challenge to the natural body movements. So we always say at North Adams Yoga that yoga is like body maintenance. Let's keep our natural mobility, let's keep our natural functions of the muscles, but at one point you're going to have to step it up a notch. Resistance training is important, and by resistance training I mean adding extra force required to move in the similar ways. So adding mini bands in dead bugs, adding weight when you're walking around like farmer carries, adding more challenge so that your muscles have to work harder in order to produce the same effects or movement patterns. So in this, it's very important because our bodies are going to plateau. Just like everything else, we get used to something and then we just stay at that level. In that, we're not growing any longer. We're not adapting to our environment necessarily. But also, again, at North Adams Yoga, we really focus on functional movement. Things that are going to help you during your day, that helps you to function, that helps your body to function at its optimal level. So when you're going to pick up your kids, it's easeful. It feels good in your body. It doesn't feel like a strain. And worst case scenario, it wouldn't cause an injury or dysfunction in the physical body. So we're working with things that are going to be natural and helpful. In yoga particularly, again, I'm speaking to the yogis in the room, we tend to spend a lot of time stretching. Yes, there are engaging postures, and we often focus on those in all levels practices and definitely in the intermediate practices. But we need to add, again, a little bit more strength to our functional stretching and mobility so that we can carry all of that stability in our own bodies. So we're going to play today with some mini bands. If you don't have mini bands, we do sell them through our studio. You can go to northadamsyoga.com. We sell these wonderful ones from Perform Better. If you don't know Perform Better, they're fantastic. They're out of Rhode Island, so they're a more local company. These are natural latex rubber, so they will stretch, they will get easier, honestly, in time. So if you have some really old ones, whether they're Perform Better ones or ones you grab around this, a box store or even TJ Maxx sells them and stuff like that, you will need to replace them at some point in time if you're using them consistently because they're going to get really stretchy and eventually they might even break, which is fine. It's normal pattern for them. But you do need to replace them if you've got really old ones that you've been using for a while. So in this, we have three colors here. We do also have a black one. I won't be demonstrating with the black one today. Yellow is the easiest. Green is going to be medium. And for today, blue is going to be our hardest. And I'll show you how to use each of these very simply with a couple of simple exercises that are going to be particularly helpful for yogis. Again, these are great for anybody. We rely on them often in fitness classes for engaging the muscular body. Really good for people who sit at a desk or drive a lot for work to really engage and open. But again, these are going to be specific for the yogis particularly, and I'll explain why when we do each exercise and movement. So to start, I'm going to suggest that you grab either the green one if you're not quite sure, or a blue one. Now, if you're using some other brand, that's absolutely fine and welcome. If you're using other brands, sometimes the color code is different. Sometimes it's like a red one is easy. It's just different material, whatever color they chose. So grab either your middle or your harder one to start. And this is, again, for the yogis. We're going to start by putting this around the legs for a lateral sidewalk. Come on up to standing. And again, you're going to take this mini band and you're going to put it around your legs. I'm going to suggest that you start above your knee. Now, you're absolutely welcome to go below your knee as well, depending on which mini bands you have, how stretchy they are, or what's comfortable in your physical body, leg hair, etc. If it doesn't feel good atop the knees, feel free to put it below the knees. Of course, you're not going to actually put it on the knee joint itself. It's not comfortable. It's not natural. It's not necessary. So above or below the knees is best. If you're going above the knee, you're working with the muscle group a little bit closer. It might be a little bit easier. If you go below the knee, you add another joint series into the body. So it's going to be further away from the direct muscle group. It's going to be a little bit more challenging. Just know that if you are going lower to start. If you're coming along with me, it's going to go above the knees, and you're going to separate your feet about hips distance, like we would normally do in a yoga class. Then squiggle your feet a little bit wider than hips distance. So when we're speaking of hips distance, we're always talking about the bone structure, the front of the hips, not necessarily the flesh and the muscle on the outside. So again, a little bit wider than your bone set, straight down. Now in this position, we're first going to just notice a little micro bend in your knees. You hypermobile people, I'm with you, don't worry. Try keeping a little micro bend in the knees. Deb calls it an athletic stance. I'm not an athlete, that doesn't make sense in my body. So think natural little bend in your knees, and that's gonna be a great space to start. Now in that bend, we still want to keep the core strong. So we're not bending our knees and kind of like letting the body collapse. We're going to keep ribs down just like dead bugs. We're going to keep the heart space open and a neutral spine. Now in this movement, you're simply going to keep your feet separate from each other, and you're going to step out. So one foot's going to step even wider, and you're going to feel you need to push into that mini band to keep that resistance. Then as you lean towards that foot, you're going to step it in. Now, not more narrow than hip distance. So you're not squeezing all the way together, right? So not more narrow than hip distance. We're going to keep that engagement for this particular variation. So you're going to try a couple each side. Now, I'm staying just in frame. So you can certainly do like 5 to 10 to one direction, and then maybe 5 to 10 in another direction. Now in this movement, you can go really slow if you want to make it harder. Slower again with control, being mindful that it's not slingshotting back in. You're keeping that resistance. It's going to engage the outer hip, the adductor muscles, and definitely glute medius, the outer hip in the buttocks flesh. So you're going again side to side. Now when you lean, less penguin walking. So it's less of this kind of like tilt side to side. We want to keep our shoulders generally above the hips as we move. So the only thing that's moving are the legs, maybe a little bit into the hips. So the outer hip here, not necessarily your chest. So if you feel like you're kind of doing a little penguin waddle, you may want to, again, just think focus or go down a notch. Go down to the green one, go a little bit lighter in your method. I can already feel it right in my glute muscle. So again, when we're speaking glute medius, we're talking this outer hip area right here. It's great for stabilizing the hips. Now why this is important, particularly for yogis, we stretch that outer hip a lot, which is great because it engages mobility so that we can move our hips, so we can boogie, so we can dance, so we can adjust if we need to pick things up. But also we sit a lot. It's going to stretch anyways. It's good to keep that mobility. So those pigeon pose, those figure 4 stretch, the double pigeon particularly, all those stretch the outer hip. So this is going to give a little bit more engagement to the outer hip, a little bit more stability, which is really particularly helpful for, again, your inversion practice, your balance, standing balance postures. This is great for anyone who's working with balance challenges. Add a little bit of this lateral movement. And again, as always, if you have questions on these movement patterns, just reach out. Send us a message on Instagram, Facebook, wherever you're watching this. Send us an email, however you want to contact us, let us know. And we can always clarify if you have questions, or we can do a one-on-one private session if there's a lot of weird sensations or you have long follow-up questions. We can always do a little bit more time together too, virtually or in the studio, whatever you prefer. Okay, so that's your first round. If that felt really easy, you can always make it harder by just layering resistance. So again, if you have our system, the black would be a nice option. I usually suggest blue to start if you're not sure. Harder will be black, really great movement pattern. If you want to make it a little bit easier, go down. If you don't have a lot of mini bands, say you only have a blue and a yellow, if you're not sure what to get, I would suggest start with a blue and a yellow, because what you can do to make it harder is put one on top of the other. If you're like, I don't have the black one, but I want to make it harder, you put the blue on, and then you just put the yellow right on top of it. You can do certainly blue and green. It's going to make it a little bit harder than a black would be, but that's great too. If you're like, okay, I got to go a little bit harder now. Eventually in time, you might even do the black and the yellow. But in these movements, you want to make sure you can still literally move. If you're going to step out and you're trying to extend and kind of go, and it doesn't really go very far, you're not getting the full engagement of the muscles. You're kind of just torturing yourself. So do make sure you can fully step out. So if you're going to move it, again, I'm just demoing without the mini band. If you're going to move and you're starting here in your nice great stance, and then you go out and you're like, oh, I can barely take it out. It might be a little too hard. Back off. So you should be able to get a good lateral step side to side. And again, depending on just the width of your hips and shoulders, wherever that might be. But if it's like I start here and I can barely kick it out and it feels like a struggle, or if you feel it in your low back, back off. Go a little bit lighter, really think dead bugs and engage. Cool? So that's first variation. So add that in, my yogis. It's really good for you. Next movement, for again, particularly the yogis, we're going to use the lightest color you have. So that would be, in our system, the yellow. So the lightest one is going to be for the shoulders. So yoga lacks pulling movements a lot. I don't know many pulling movements at all, unless you're working on like pulling to press to handstand, stuff like that. There's very little pulling movements. There are muscle engagements for the back muscles, like locust pose. Locust pose is great. We always suggest a little locust pose, especially during flow practice. Gets you time off the wrists, but again, good strengthener for the back muscles, because as our pretty modern Western society, we tend to spend a lot of time hunched. Again, especially those of you who are on a computer or on your phone all day, or just kind of like sitting on the couch at the end of the evening when you're done and you're chilling, we tend to round. This is, of course, not a blanket statement. Everyone's got different patterns in their own physical body, but that's going to be a tendency. And now with yoga, we try to focus a lot, especially in North Adams Yoga, on neutral spine more than the flexion of the spine. That comes into our core workouts, that comes into our forward folds. We're always thinking neutral as much as possible because of what we're doing throughout the rest of the day. Now, of course, there is some rounding. For example, Kormasana, tortoise pose, Tarasana, star pose. We get some rounding into the spine once in a while, and that's totally great to work on that flexion. It's not a bad movement of our body, but we want to be able to go the other way too. We want to be able to engage, or even to go to back bends and spinal extensions. So those of you who are working on back bends, like drop backs, wheel pose, any sort of back bend, bow pose, anything, this is going to help out with that. It's going to get a little bit into the back of the shoulders. Now, as we're talking about the back of the shoulders, if you notice here, the shoulder blade. So we have the tip of the shoulder blade way down here. I personally don't, it's hard for me to kind of wing out my shoulder blade because I've been working on my back muscles for a really long time. But the base of the shoulder blade down here at the base, the tip, we're going to think about the tip of the shoulder blade squeezing in and down. So when we do not just in is going to get into the rhomboids between the shoulder blades, like you're pinching your shoulder blades together. That's a good movement too. It does stretch a little bit across the front of the chest. But we want to think in and then pull down. Now when we pull down, it's almost going to pull us into a back bend, a little bit of a chest opening. So again, just in, but really think pull down. You can see already the neck pulls back. I'm not doing that. That's just naturally drawing back, shoulders in line with the earlobes. So in and then down. That's going to lengthen the neck. That's going to open the heart. When we do these, yogis, again, particularly I'm talking to yogis, try not to launch yourself into a low back bend. And we'll do that when we get going. So we want the opening to be just the chest, not the lumbar spine pushing the belly open. And again, this is specifically often yogis will do this. Of course, again, it'll apply to other people, but yogis, we're going to go, oh, we're going into a back bend. Let me go back. Not going into a back bend. We're just engaging that top half of your back muscles. Okay, so we're going to do some lat pull downs. So for the lat pull downs, your latissimus dorsi muscle is on to the back body. It's going to wrap almost all the way down towards your hips. It's a large muscle, and I encourage you to Google it. In that large muscle group, we're going to engage, again, by thinking pulling down. So you're going to take this mini band, and if you've been in class, we've done this before. You're going to take the mini band, you're going to put it kind of around your wrists or the bottom part of your hand. And there are two different variations. One's going to be thumbs pointing into each other. The other will be thumbs pointing up, and it's just a slightly different engagement. You can do this standing. I'm doing it kneeling just so you can see a little bit better. If you're doing it kneeling, do make sure, again, you have a nice tall spine. So in either kneeling position or standing, you're going to think hips underneath your shoulders, shoulders away from the ears. A little engagement of the core like dead bugs. Draw the ribs down, not tilting the hips, not the Steve Urkel, but keeping long, low back, squeezing the gluteal muscles, buttocks, flesh. So we're creating this neutrality for the body. So we're just isolating, again, a little bit more to the upper back. So you're going to put it around the wrist. We'll start with the thumbs pointing in, but again, you can do either variation, whatever one you want to choose. Neutral head and neck, chin draws back in space. Soften the shoulders down the back, squeeze shoulder blades in and down. Now again, keeping the core strong, lift your arms just to shoulder height. And if you're not sure where shoulder height is for you, use a mirror, use a camera, find that sweet spot. Then you're going to push out. So you're trying to separate your hands. So we're going to push out. Now keeping that push out, you pull down and relax. You're going to do that a few more times. So lift to shoulder height, shoulders in and down the back, core strong, push out, pull down, relax. So now as you do this, I'll turn a couple different angles as you continue. Keep that core strong. So again, no deep back bend. Just shoulder height, not higher. Just shoulder height. It's not very high. Pull open and down. So you're going to do a couple more that way. I'll turn around so you can see the back muscle engagement. Again, shoulders away from the ear, strong core. Lift to shoulder height, push open, pull down, and relax. So keep going a couple more if you want. Again, maybe you would aim probably 5 or 10 with the thumbs down in, 5 or 10 with the thumbs up. In that, we want, again, that base of the shoulder blade to doing the work. You may feel some synergist assisting muscles working too, particularly the tricep, the back of the arm. That's very normal. That's fine. You may feel a little bit into the top of the shoulder too. Hopefully, this is not the primary engager. This is your trap, your trapezius. Hopefully this is not doing most of the work, because again, this is a space that we tend to use a lot, hold a lot of tension here, especially during stress or colder weather. We tend to go whoop, right up here. So we want to keep that energy going down. So every time, remembering yogis, slow is good. Go slow, but do breathe. Up to shoulder height, set your shoulders first. So if you come up to shoulder height and your shoulders are up here and you go to push open, yeah, those are going to clench on and engage, and it's going to feel crappy. So instead, when you get up to shoulder height, think shoulders down the back body, push open and pull down. So you'll notice even here, my shoulders pull down my back body, but my hands are pretty wide. Now, depending on the resistance, if this is like really challenging for you, that's okay. You may not get quite as wide, but over time, as we build more of that strength to push open, we can keep those shoulders really pulling down a little bit more. So I would suggest, again, for these mini band lat pull downs, you're only doing the lower or the middle. Honestly, even the middle is pretty challenging, depending, again, of course, on physical body. But yogis, if you're just starting out, keep it easy. Do just the yellow if that feels better for you. So again, you can kick it up a notch when the yellow feels really easy, or depending on the day. But we want to, again, be very mindful that there's no pain in the shoulders. If there's pain, sometimes the alignment may be a little bit off. And again, I can work with you more one-on-one if you have questions on that. If it's a quick question, I'm happy to answer. If it's a longer question, we might have to do a one-on-one session, but that's absolutely welcome if you have questions on that. But again, you're thinking shoulders in and down, and you're really pinching the shoulder blades in towards each other. So in doing that, again, we're going to get those back muscles to engage, to pull down. That's going to naturally release some of that tension in the upper shoulder without necessarily just stretching the crap out of it, right? So we want to keep that engagement so that the rest of our day we're feeling good, not just necessarily making it feel good for those 15 minutes in yoga practice and then we walk off the mat and we're like, ugh, I still don't feel good. Let's keep that pattern so that you don't have to necessarily try to stretch it all the time. Same thing with the lateral side steps, that engagement for the gluteal muscles, for the hips, for the outer leg. It opens the front of the hip flexor. So we don't necessarily have to just constantly stretch the front of the hip flexors after you've been sitting for a long time and it feels really short and crunchy and not good. Yeah, definitely. Lengthen it out, get some blood flowing into the muscle groups, but use the opposite side of the body to help release instead of just stretch. Think release. So yogis, I hope this is helpful information to you. If you have questions, again, reach out. Happy to help. I can send you additional little clips. I can, again, arrange a private lesson with you in the studio or via Zoom, or just, again, give you more support if you need it. Otherwise, we'll maybe check in another time or come to class and we'll add mini bands maybe to our dead bugs or to other standing postures. If you need them, northadamsyoga.com, or again, you can find them in lots of box stores or online fitness websites. Have a lovely day. Drink water. Please keep breathing and do you.